90% of the world's population will live in urban areas, and the way we use energy in these environments will dramatically impact how we live, work, and grow as a community. That's why Ryerson University created the Center for Urban Energy, or CUE for short. Here in downtown Toronto, world-class researchers, students, and partners are solving urban energy issues.
It was about time that we started to focus on some of the issues that urban centres were facing to make our systems more efficient for our customers.
It's an old system that was built, most of which after the Second World War, and is in desperate need of renewal.
It's basically about modernization and leveraging technology that we have.
Getting the most out of what you have is what renewable energy sources such as wind and solar are all about. But it's not always windy or sunny when you need it. CUE's Energy on Time project solves that challenge by using an innovative approach to store clean energy and then make it available when it's needed.
This is the first flywheel in the world that has been able to store energy over many, many hours at a time. Over an 8 to 10 hour period, we'll only lose about 5% of the energy due to frictional losses.
Say if the flywheel is the muscle, Energy on Time was the brain that helped it to use its capabilities as efficient as possible.
It's really world-beating, in my opinion. It's small, it's contained, and it can be put in right where the problems are.
Homeowners want to live comfortably, but keeping energy bills under control all year round can be a challenge. CUE's Intelligent Home Sensor gets rid of all the guesswork by monitoring and adjusting energy usage without compromising the homeowner's comfort.
What is missing is the energy management devices to bridge the gap between informing the homeowners of their energy consumption and optimizing the complex operation of the HVAC units.
Intelligent home sensor makes all the appliances like television, heating, ventilation, lights, everything communicate to each other, which saves money and also save energy.
What is the action we're looking for? To really shift the demand off of peak times when the system is so overstressed and be able to move it in periods when the system is at rest.
Innovation comes in many forms. That's why we created a business incubator and accelerator called IQ for energy entrepreneurs. Here, companies like Plug and Drive are creating solutions for electric cars in urban environments.
We live in a condensed city where millions of people live in a pretty small footprint area. And the electric car and its distances of the batteries are ideally suited for that kind of application.
Our studies show about 80% of people charge at home. But the reality is, to get people on board with electric cars, they need to see stations out in the public realm.
If we want to have more people using electrical cars, we have to make this transition easier and simple for them. That's what our system does.
Before long, you're going to see charging stations sprinkled throughout the downtown core.
Universities are hotbeds of research and innovation. What we've been able to do in our work with Ryerson in particular is to say, here's where we're going. Here are the issues that we're having. How can you help us? And how can we help you direct your research in a way that's going to be useful to industry?
If we're going to build the system over, what are we going to build it to look like? How is it going to perform for us? What technologies are we going to use? How will those technologies change the relationship we have with our customer today? And so our relationship with CUE really provides us that expert, smart, young, technology-savvy thought process on what Toronto Hydro will look like 50 and 100 years from now.
At the Center for Urban Energy, our researchers, students, and partners are working to solve tomorrow's energy problems today. So check us out. Visit our website or just drop by.
Have another video queued up, which is to get us into a community energy planning space, and this is courtesy of my colleague Jose Echeverry, and we'll roll that and then we'll get our panel started.
We use energy lots of energy. But the way we manage energy is facing great changes. The world's fossil energy resources are scarce and rising in price, and we will need to find other sources of energy that do not impact the climate. Denmark has a political objective of fossil fuel independence, and therefore our energy systems will change significantly in the coming decades. In 40 years, Denmark's energy supply should be based on renewable energy, with wind power, biomass and solar energy representing the largest resources. But where should the energy come from when the wind does not blow? What should we do with the surplus energy when wind power generation far exceeds demand? And which forms of energy should we use in places where we cannot use the power from wind, sun and biomass? The answer is integration. Integration of our energy systems. In a future based on renewable energy, the gas system can come to play a completely new role by using gas produced on the basis of such renewable energy sources as biomass, organic waste, sun and wind. It is windy in Denmark, so much so that theoretically we could meet far more than Denmark's demand for energy through wind power. Wind power, together with biomass and solar energy, constitute the largest renewable energy resources in Denmark. Today, most of our energy consumption is covered by coal, oil and natural gas. However, in 2050, renewable energy should meet all of the Danish energy demand. The entire supply of energy for electricity, heating, transport and industrial production should be covered by renewable energy. At the same time, we should utilize the energy far more efficiently so that we can consume less of it in the future without compromising our everyday life and comfort, even though the level of activity in society increases. Moreover, with increased volumes of renewable energy, we will establish an electricity-oriented society and utilize electricity in completely new sectors that currently use coal, oil and natural gas. But in the electricity-oriented society of the future, there will also be energy consumption to which electricity is not suited and which will require an easily accessible fuel. For example, for long-distance road transport and for ships and planes, as well as an array of industrial processes. This fuel could be gas-produced from renewable energy. Some of the most significant renewable energy forms that will replace fossil fuels in Denmark in the long term are wind, solar and wave energy, as well as biomass and biogas. Common to wind, solar and wave energy is that the power generated by these sources of energy fluctuates as the wind blows or as the sun shines. Therefore, the conversion of Denmark's energy supply to utilize considerable volumes of power from energy sources that fluctuate according to the weather represents a great challenge. Electricity should be used the moment it is generated. Otherwise, a power system outage may occur. If we generate too little, there will be insufficient power to meet demand. And if we generate too much, the power system becomes overloaded. Today, it is far too expensive to store electricity in large batteries. The most energy-efficient use of electricity is at the moment of generation. Currently, imbalances between demand and generation are resolved by transmitting the renewable energy into a large international power market, to where the demand is and where the value of the energy is greatest. But energy generation from wind, sun and waves does not follow power demand. So there is also a need for fuels for generating power when there is insufficient wind. On those days when the wind is still, the energy shortfall in Denmark will be equivalent to the output of 10 large power stations. Although this only occurs for a limited number of hours each year, naturally, power should still be available in the sockets when the wind drops. In such circumstances, gas can contribute to the solution. Gas produced on the basis of renewable energy. Gas is a stable and efficient form of energy that can be flexibly produced from renewable energy sources. And as a flexible building block, gas can be combined and converted into a variety of fuels that can supplement the power system in pace with the electrification of society. Some of these fuels are liquid, others are gaseous, and they have different properties and strengths. Methanol, ethanol, biogas, hydrogen and other gases. A gas system with a broad array of renewable energy-based gases can become a vital element in the energy system of the future. Biomass and waste can be converted to gases. Power from solar, wind and wave energy can be converted to gases. Gas can be converted to different fuel types that can be utilized for electricity, heating, transport and industrial production. Gas can be stored and used when it is needed. Gas can supplement the supply of energy on days of insufficient wind and when power is expensive. Conversely, when the availability of wind exceeds demand and power becomes cheap, the surplus power can be converted to gas, which can be stored in large volumes for later use. Consequently, the flexibility of gas is well suited to wind power and other variable energy sources. Gas can help to link our future energy resources together with our future energy requirements. We already produce biogas from agricultural manure in Denmark, but there are numerous other possibilities for producing green gas. Gas can be extracted from biomass and waste, and in the long term, gas can also be produced from electricity when wind is abundant, and thus wind power is cheaper than usual. The biomass that can be converted to gas is derived from various organic materials. We call it yellow, green, and blue biomass. Yellow biomass primarily consists of straw and wood chips. Green biomass consists, for example, of energy willow and clover. Blue biomass comes from algae and seaweed. Some of the gas can also be produced by converting such waste as slurry from agriculture and organic waste from industry and households. Biomass and waste are converted to gas in several ways. Biogas is formed from organic materials in large containers without oxygen. These organic materials include slurry, wastewater, or waste which decompose biologically. The technology is already deployed on a large scale today, especially in areas of intensive animal husbandry. The other method is thermal biogas production. This method utilizes such materials as straw, wood chips, wood pellets, or seaweed. The thermal biogas production process is carried out in large containers with oxygen present. The organic materials are heated and the high temperatures result in the formation of gas. The third method involves the fermentation of biomass to the biofuel ethanol. The residual products in the process can be used for thermal gasification or for classic biogas production by oxygen-free gasification. All these technologies have been around for a long time. Thermal biogas production was widely used during World War II. The innovation lies in the huge volumes of gas that should now be produced. The gas from the processes can be collected in gas storage facilities and later upgraded and transported through the internationally connected natural gas network. The production processes, especially thermal biogas production, develop heat. This can be collected and distributed through the district heating network, thereby fully utilizing the energy. Danish universities and businesses have, through new research, made it possible to significantly increase the production of gas from biomass resources which were not previously utilized, and that without using biomass that can be utilized for the production of food. Consequently, gas based on biomass and waste can become a significant energy source in Denmark. With further research and development, the storage of wind power generation as gas will also be possible in the long term. This is achieved by means of electrolysis. The electrolysis process has been known for more than 100 years and is used today primarily for industrial purposes. Danish universities and businesses are working to develop such industrial plants for large-scale energy production and fuel cells, which will enable highly efficient electrolysis. Fuel cells are renowned for being able to produce electricity and water by means of oxygen and gas. But fuel cells can also be used conversely for producing hydrogen, carbon monoxide, or other electrolysis gases, for from electricity and water. When wind is abundant and wind power generation exceeds demand, the price of power falls. This cheaper power can, via electrolysis, be used for producing gas. In that way, wind power can be converted into gas in the future and stored for later use. As with other processes, electrolysis also generates heat, which can be collected and distributed through the district heating network, thereby utilizing the energy efficiently. With the assistance of a range of technologies and processes, the energy from wind power, biomass and waste can thus be stored in large volumes in the existing gas network. At the same time, gas is cheap to transport and easy to store. In Denmark, we have gas storage facilities capable of covering 1/4 of our annual gas consumption. This is clearly an advantage when distributing and consuming the gas. Gas is a versatile fuel that lends itself to numerous applications. Gas based on wind power, biomass and waste can be used, for example, to generate power and heat, utilized in households and industry, or used for transport in lorries, private vehicles and ships. Given the increasing volumes of wind power, CHP plants that utilize biomass to co-generate power and heat will be necessary to ensure the supply of power also when the wind abates. However, gas-fired power stations will also be necessary to supply so-called peak load generation during the relatively few hours each year when the wind is still and demand is highest. This is a task which gas-fired power stations solve cost-effectively because they are relatively inexpensive, more flexible and easier to adapt to the generation of power in step with fluctuations in wind power generation. In this way, the gas system can be used as a storage facility for large volumes of wind power. When there is an abundance of wind and power therefore is cheap, the wind power can be converted into gas and stored for later use. And when the wind is still and therefore the price of power rises, gas by means of a gas turbine at a power station can generate power. The power can be transmitted to the internationally connected power grid to provide light, keep computers and machines running, or power electric vehicles, which should replace petrol and diesel vehicles in the future. Gas derived from wind power, biomass and waste can also be used directly as a fuel in the transport sector. The gas can be used to produce biofuels for passenger and heavy-duty vehicle transport. Most diesel and petrol engines can be easily converted to run on biofuels or replaced by vehicles that run on gas. Moreover, some of the largest energy consumers, namely shipping and air traffic, can also utilize liquid or gaseous biofuels. There are already huge fleets of cars and heavy-duty vehicles running on gas throughout Europe. In this way, green gas can contribute significantly to reducing the overall CO2 emissions in the transport sector to the benefit of the climate. The gas can also be upgraded and piped directly into the internationally connected gas network for use in households, industry, or in CHP plants, which generate both heat for the district heating network and electricity for the grid. With gas as an energy carrier, wind and biomass could be utilized throughout the entire Danish energy system, for power generation, for biofuels in the transport sector, and as upgraded biogas for, among others, CHP generation. Alternatively, the gas can be held in the large underground storage facilities in Denmark, or transported to the internationally connected gas network. To achieve the aim of a Denmark based on renewable energy, the Danish energy system must convert from coal, oil and natural gas to wind power, biomass and other sources of renewable energy. For many years, Denmark has been self-sufficient in natural gas due to North Sea production. However, this natural gas will run out in the coming years, and Denmark will need to find other sources of gas concurrent with its conversion to renewable energy. In the coming years, the gas system could be gradually converted from exclusively transporting natural gas to also transporting gas derived from renewable energy sources such as wind, biomass and waste. In this way, the Danish gas network could still be used for transporting energy to Danish consumers for many years to come. Biogas is already supplying energy to the Danes today, and the volume of biogas will increase in the future. Within the next 10 years, the fermentation technology is expected to be developed commercially for the production of ethanol based on second-generation biomass. The green gases from thermal gasification will be able to supply gas in significant volumes to the Danish energy system from around 2020, while gas from wind power via electrolysis will probably be able to supply green gas in significant volumes from around 2030. The conversion will result in a more extensive application of gas than today, and thus gas could become a far more integral part of the Danish energy system. The Danish electricity and gas networks are linked to strong international connections. Also, electricity and gas are traded in a highly competitive international market to the benefit of society. The green gas can also be traded in an international market. In 40 years, Denmark's energy supply should be converted to renewable energy. A gas system utilizing gas based on renewable energy can constitute a significant contribution to the conversion towards a sustainable society, to the benefit of people, the economy, and the environment.
Great, thanks. A good bridge into our conversation. Interestingly, we heard something very similar last year at our seminar series from the Director General of Planning at the German Department of the Environment, who said that they are moving in the same direction in terms of storage technologies around renewable energy. My name is Mark Winfield. I'm co-chair of the Sustainable Energy Initiative at York University. I want to welcome everybody here to part 2 of our conversation about community energy planning. The previous session on February 4th really focused on the policy and land use planning connections between energy and land use, and looked at where the conversation was at in Ontario. And in that context, we sort of recognize this is a very bottom-up process which has been happening, that has really been led from the municipal level in the absence of much of a provincial framework. And indeed, Rob Kerr sort of was I think, explaining where, in fact, there are some potential complications in the relationships between the province and municipalities and local utilities in terms of where they're going with this discussion. And in that context, we also had Alex Boston join us from British Columbia, because in BC, which is the other jurisdiction in Canada which has been in the forefront of the discussion around community energy planning, their municipalities and utilities are working within a much more clearly established provincial policy framework. Indeed, there's legislative mandates which require municipalities to be planning in terms of reducing their greenhouse gas emissions, to be taking into consideration climate change adaptation as well. And that has prompted municipal governments to think about these questions in much more systemic ways. And one of the things we discover, particularly when we look at the intersection with land use planning, is that this is and these are the words of someone who was very involved in planning, indeed drafting the Places to Grow plan here in Ontario, was that when thinking about energy, this was just not a lens through which planners have traditionally thought about things. And it was in that context that we had folks from Guelph, from the City of Toronto, from Durham Region, talking about what their communities are doing in terms of energy planning. For this second session, we shifted the focus a little bit from the policy level down to the level of implementation and actually operationalizing some of these concepts on the ground, and thinking through what some of the opportunities and also some of the challenges when one actually tries to turn this theory into reality. And in that context, we have a number of distinguished speakers today. We are short one. which is Richard Laszlo from Quest, who was to be our leadoff, but he had other business to deal with this morning, specifically becoming a father. And we thought perhaps he needs to deal with that today first, and we'll catch up with him later on in the process. The process we'll follow today will be the same as last time, as I'll ask each speaker to come up and make their remarks. We're going to ask people to stay to 10 to 15 minutes to keep us on track. Ask people to hold, the audience to hold questions until we've heard from all four speakers, and then we'll have a question and answer session with the speakers as a panel up here for the last half hour or so. So our first speaker today is Jim Sanders from Enbridge Energy. He's the Director of Market and Business Development and also President of Niagara Gas Transmission Limited. He has spent the majority of his time in the natural gas industry with Union Gas, Duke Energy, and now Enbridge Gas Distribution. He has a bachelor's degree in applied science, civil engineering from the University of Waterloo, and a master's in public engineering and public policy from McMaster, although neither Ryerson nor York will hold that against him, and we are more than happy to have him here. At the moment, he is been responsible for design, construction, and operation of distribution, transmission, and storage systems in both Canada and the United States, and he's currently on the board of directors for Utilization Technology Development, the Canadian Natural Gas Vehicle Association, and Energy Technology and Innovation Canada, which is an affiliation of the Canadian Natural Gas Association. Jim.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I thought the introduction video was really interesting. The animation that Denmark came up with for the integrated system made it look really easy. And I kept thinking over my career of all the challenges of actually trying to plug all those things in and get them going. So I understand the theme for today was operational challenges. And first of all, I'll just say I had deleted the lawyer's note with all the small font that nobody reads and says, you know, these are my opinions and not Enbridge's. So first of all, I just thought, again, a lot of detail here. I won't go through all this, but the Enbridge system across North America really touches on most of the aspects of the energy systems we heard about this morning already, where we look at oil, liquids, natural gas, electricity. One of the recent thrusts for Enbridge has been the renewable energy sector. I think we're up to about $3 billion in assets, excuse me, on wind, solar, geothermal, and actually dabbling into now the hydrogen side of the equation as well. So when I sat down to put this together, the first thing I thought of was, well, you know, in the good old days, operations could suffer in silence and not very many people would pay much attention to what was actually going on under the ground or under the street or over their head in the wires. Well, today that's not really the case. As we look at the life cycle of operating the assets, we now need to take into consideration both technical, economic, environmental, social, and political aspects of those operations. And really, every step of the way, those are now starting to be factors. So I'll just touch on each of those quickly. So when I looked at technical, the good old days used to be how big do you want it, where do you want it, how much do you want. So it was a fairly straightforward process to design and build the assets and put them in operation. Well, today, I think as everybody can appreciate, the day doesn't go by pretty much now that you don't hear about energy in the news and some issue related to energy. And I think it was just last week or the week before I saw the St. Clair incident with the substation that caught on fire. You know, as a classic example. So when we look at safety and reliability around those assets, that tolerance level for risk that society would have probably ignored for the most part in the past is really gone. Those are in the news and immediate, and the industry needs to respond to that. I call it dynamic standards. One of the aspects I think that comes out of all of this is that as, I'll say again, historically would have looked at codes and standards and regulations that were built up over decades, and we would have used those to design, build, and operate the assets. Well, today it's almost like every project that you tackle, you have to adjust, you have to modify, you have to accommodate those codes and standards to the demands of the specific projects. And through the increased transparency that comes with that. Everybody's asking about why, how'd you get there, what's the impact on me? A more traditional aspect of the technical challenges and operations is the aging and end of life of assets. If you look at the development of the infrastructure, and not just in Ontario, but in most of North America, a very large build occurred in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. Well, those assets are coming to the end of their life. And how do we deal with that? And how do we pay with that? I'll pay for that. I'll talk about later in the economic side. Another maybe more mundane issue is access to technical expertise and qualified staff. So as our baby boom generation passes through, we're starting to see those challenges, not to mention the growth. And a classic cycle in Canada is when the oil sands activity takes off in Alberta, everybody goes west. And so to try and find the skills that you need in other jurisdictions becomes more of a challenge. And we saw some of this morning as well. Systems integration. So in the past where we may have all operated from the electrical and gas sectors and the petroleum sectors independently, that integration is real and it's happening now. I can see with operating the gas system, for example, related to power generation, the communication between the ISO and the gas system has to be more real-time and more active. Economic. And I don't think a lot of this is new. The consumer wants the lowest possible cost. But I think the twist these days is the ambitious goals of sustainability, reduce environmental footprint, lower impacts to the communities, and I'll say right down to the individuals. You got to balance that with the usual requirements of investors. They want their money, they want their return on investment, and you have to balance those two. Again, I'll say not that it is new completely, but the cost of externalities is certainly more of a factor than it has been in the past. I think public awareness and communication of those externalities across not just the local communities, but also society as a whole, and again, we heard some of it today around dealing with greenhouse gases and global warming, are realities that the communities and people as a general case are aware of. So we have to deal with those costs. And another bigger challenge, I think, lately is also the major periodic costs. I talked about the aging infrastructure issues. So occasionally we're coming up against a very large build of assets, and the costs associated and implications with those are not easily handled, and certainly a challenge when you have to translate that back down into rate and rate implication. Environmental. So again, we've heard it already today, the goal of environmental sustainability is a general accepted goal across the energy industry, and that requires new solutions. Certainly from where we were 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we're needing innovations and new ideas to meet that goal. However, one of the challenges, and I'll put a caveat in, don't trust my math there on the conversion to terawatt hours. It's not a unit I usually deal with, but I did my best to convert the energy pie for Ontario to say, well, what is the scale of the issue here? When we look at the challenge of dealing with energy and a broad definition of energy consumption, what are we dealing with? Well, when you look at the electrical system in Ontario, and I pulled this off, I think the ISO website, 140 or so terawatt hours a year is the energy consumption in Ontario. Well, that's actually one of the smaller slices of the energy pie for the province. So when we talk about energy storage, we talk about energy transmission and distribution to replace or supplant the other sources of energy, that's a big challenge. These are very, very large numbers. Again, don't trust my math, but I think we have around 700 windmills in the province today. If you were going to take a chunk of the petroleum or gas market today, you would need thousands and thousands of windmills, and we've seen the challenges that that's created already. Locating assets, again, not a new issue, but again, I think a heightened issue when you want to place a new asset of any size or scale into a community. There's 1,000 different voices out there debating where they should go or why they should be there. Social and political, this will be my last point. I saw this the other day and I thought, well, that's pretty appropriate, the banana approach to dealing with assets. And that's one of the challenges we face in the industry is there is a view out there that we don't want these assets, we don't need these assets, and yet the balance on the demand side remains. So the supply side challenge is don't build it, but still meet my demands. I'll say the risk tolerance issue I talked about earlier And I say whether it's real or perceived, it really doesn't matter in a sense. The tolerance issue is diminished out there. And as an industry and operating these assets, we have to be aware of that. The whole communication world has changed dramatically. The real-time aspect of communication and information flowing is with us every day, almost literally every moment. I don't know about you guys, but my cell phone goes off about every 30 seconds these days. And that is something that we have to deal with. The need for enhanced proactive communication within the political and the communities out there is another aspect of operations that, again, in the good old days, we didn't really deal with on a day-to-day basis, but today we have to. And that's it. Hopefully I stuck to my 10 minutes. And if we want to do questions later?
Yeah, we'll do questions as a panel at the end. That's great. Thank you. Our second speaker, there's a very good contextual discussion there. Our second speaker is Brian Smith, who is the Chief Conservation Officer with Horizon Utilities. He took that position in 2009. He's responsible for strategic planning of the implementation of the utilities CDM program. Meet his 2014 targets. I understand we're now up to 2015, sort of, at least. And that's valued at $60 million, expected to save 281 gigawatt hours of energy and 60 megawatts of demand by 2014. He's been instrumental in the delivery of CDM programs at Horizon's service territory, which includes, and they've already saved 83 gigawatt hours of energy, 120 megawatts of demand savings, equivalent to about half the demand for the city of St. Catharines. So Horizon is clearly one of the leaders here, and we felt very strongly we needed to have both the gas utility side of the conversation here and also the electric utility side as well. And that was part of the reason that we invited Brian, and he was kind enough to accept. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, good morning, everyone. The presentation I'm about to make this morning really deals on some of the operational challenges in terms of community energy planning and some of the sort of practical examples that we've come across in our service territory. So it's fitting that I start off the presentation by just outlining a little bit of an organization structure for the City of Hamilton, City of St. Catharines, the communities that we serve as a local distribution utility. Part of our role as a utility is to enable the smart grid and is to enable energy solutions for customers and interconnect them into the distribution system. Coincidentally, in this particular organization structure, we've got 4 different entities actually that have energy assets within our distribution system, including the City of Hamilton, Hamilton Community Energy, Horizon Energy Solutions, and St. Catharines Hydro Generation. So when we look at the types of assets that exist, the sources of energy in terms of our connection to some of these types of projects include hydroelectric generation, biomass, solar, wind, geothermal solutions, and combined heat and power systems. So the first example that I wanted to raise in terms of some operational challenges has to do with the Haywood Generating Station. Back in 1988, the City of St. Catharines was looking to explore some resources in hydroelectric generation down near Port Dalhousie. This particular plant was to produce 6.5 megawatts of peak power, and the modus operandi was basically to look at ponding up water to meet peak power demands, and the asset was owned by St. Catharines Hydroelectric Commission at the time. And part of the asset was to reduce the purpose was to reduce the cost of power that we pay to Ontario Hydro through our power bill, thus reducing the cost of the electricity consumers. So part of the issue when we start looking at these types of projects starts off with looking at the legal implications of projects like land rights, who owns the control structure, water rights, were all sort of legal considerations. Then through deregulation in '99, and this is, my point is in terms of flexibility for these types of projects or energy projects going forward, through deregulation, it required a new entity to be created, St. Catharines Hydro Generation, whereby these assets were transferred. So the mode of operandi changed. They became a licensed generator through the Ontario Energy Board, and through that particular process, now, this generating station is used to produce power at peak hourly Ontario energy prices. So the complexity in terms of engineering required looking at electrically connecting the station, putting in transfer trip schemes at the station that it was connected to, so that when the station tripped off, that there was no reliability concerns for the customers that were connected to that particular feeder. So there was, quite a bit of engineering background that had to go into commissioning this type of station. Another example that I wanted to put forward for consideration, similar story, but it's the St. Lawrence Seaway site. Those of you that are familiar with the Welland Canal system might have seen this landmark. It's the surge tank at the Seaway. Similar situation, starts off in terms of looking at again, the water rights, negotiating the water rights between the U.S. and Ontario Power Generation was a consideration when they first looked at this particular project. It was to produce 15 megawatts of generation capacity, and 10 megawatts of that is actually serving the whole Seaway system, the distribution system to run the lift locks. The balance was exported to the Ryerson distribution system. At that time it was St. Catharines Hydro. And once again, engineering considerations, there was certainly upgrades that was required in terms of aging infrastructure to the Seaway substation, as well as new feeder capacity that would be built to connect this particular type of project. And also in terms of a partnership with the Seaway, certainly terms of the agreement, we had to look at sort of a revenue sharing scheme, the capital costs that were required to upgrade the station, as well as build the feeder connection, and also maintain the service and the level of service that they were used to with regard to operating the Seaway lift locks as the main priority. So this is another project, again, very complex, more traditional hydroelectric resource that was an example for us to connect to our distribution system. So in shifting gears over to an example here in Hamilton, is the Hamilton Community Energy System. And I've got a few slides here that relate to their particular case. The focus of Hamilton Community Energy is to serve the downtown core, the core set of buildings, and you see a list of customers here that are participants and customers of the HCE. So basically the HCE facilities have in the downtown core 3 boilers, as well as a cogeneration unit producing 3.5 megawatts of power into the downtown core. So the focus being providing heating through the district energy system and piping to all these buildings, and also the electricity interconnection with Horizon's distribution system. Again, required some protection coordination between their facilities and our grid. Also monitoring back at our control center to ensure that the reliability for the customers. This particular example is a great initiative because during the 2003 outage that occurred, all the customers that were connected to the district energy system did not receive any outages whatsoever. So certainly a lot of benefit to this type of project. Okay, another example in terms of some of the complexity in terms of projects and is the the Woodward wastewater treatment facility here. Those of you that have traveled the QEW and happen to see the big globe that is in the background off the highway, that's a storage facility for methane gas at the wastewater treatment facility. And they were able to use that capturing system to produce methane gas to power a 1.6 megawatt cogeneration facility. So they're capturing the methane gas, using the methane gas as well as the heating produced through the cogeneration unit to offset heating requirements in the facility. And they've also looked at expanding the export of methane gas into the Union Gas pipeline distribution system. So there's really three benefits that occurred out of this particular project. From I guess a barriers perspective, when they first went into it, the Municipal Act didn't allow for the City of Hamilton to own generation resources. So they had to create a brand new company, Hamilton Renewable Power Inc., in order to have the correct corporate structure to be able to operate this facility. Also, becoming a licensed generator through the Ontario Energy Board was a consideration as well in setting this up. From an engineering perspective, one of the things that they had to consider is future expansion of the plant and where facilities were located. There were just so many utility conflicts within the ground that they had to build this utilidor structure. And the utilidor structure facilitated the pipeline of the methane gas into the generation unit, as well as the heating recovery system back into the water treatment facility, as well as the export of the electricity into their substation. So that created some challenges and barriers engineering-wise to connect this particular facility. And there's more details that could be provided if you're interested in this type of project through the City of Hamilton website. There's information on their project. So kind of shifting gears into more of the smart grid sort of solutions with fit and microfit projects. Provincially, there's a number of applications that are on file with the Ontario Power Authority, and in our particular jurisdiction, we are connecting microfit projects and have a number of fit projects that are still in the works. Again, I think Anthony Haynes in one of the presentations here spoke about aging infrastructure. And that seems to be one of the barriers in terms of connection of a lot of facilities for customers, is just the short circuit capacity. A lot of stations is actually a limiting factor in being able to connect some of these, and it requires the updates of a number of transformer stations across the province to allow for that capacity and that interconnectivity that's required. From a connection standpoint, certainly metering requirements and data requirements are a big demand for customers, and in these types of projects, especially multiple sites, managing multiple sites, their customers are interested in those types of solutions. So just to kind of summarize operational framework considerations as it relates to some of these types of examples I presented. Developing sound community energy plans requires coordination between the municipality, utility coordination committees, customer engagement, assessment of connection requirements, development of full business cases, and legal review of required contract requirements and business requirements. And consideration to future support of the assets through standby power considerations and flexible operating parameters to adapt to fluctuation in energy prices or system demands. And I think that's key going forward, that what we know today often can change in the future, and having that sort of flexibility to operate these types of facilities is important, and reliability has to be a main consideration. And just want to illustrate a few of the planning tools that we currently use for our energy plans here at Horizon Utilities. Certainly, first and foremost, we have a supervisory control and data acquisition system that we collect information on all our distribution circuits, and we use that as a foundation for our distribution system modeling. So we can model and basically look at the urban expansion of our facilities and basically model it in a way that optimizes the distribution system use, both economically and geographically. And also we have an asset management software, so it's important for us to be able to look at the age of our infrastructure and be able to maintain it and look at our capital investments in a strategic way to best suit our customers. And a GIS system that we're currently have all our facilities mapped onto a GIS, so we know where everything is, and it aids in the dispatch, and we're looking to expand it into an outage management system to further our reliability for customers. And of course, planning and forecasting models of our energy sales by customer class is key when we're looking at doing our rates applications. And something that's very new to us and it's very useful in our energy conservation initiatives is a project which involves mapping the energy intensity of all our customers onto a land base. And that strategically helps us look for opportunities for buildings and infrastructure that would best benefit from conservation and demand management. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
That's very good. My immediate reaction is that we've been far too GTA-centric in our perspective, and we need to be paying attention to what's going on in the Niagara Peninsula as well, because some very interesting things and some common themes that we've heard from other folks sort of coming up. Okay, well, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Ed Seward, who is the Manager of Market Opportunity Development with Union Gas. He's been with Union for 25 years with a focus on marketing and business development. His current responsibilities include helping create the joint Union Gas-Enbridge gas distribution application to the OEB on renewable natural gas. And he also represents Union Gas at the Quality Urban Energy Systems for Tomorrow, which is QUEST, Smart Grid Forum Corporate Partners Committee. And he also sits on the Guelph Mayor's Task Force for Community Energy as a member of the Advisory Group for Pollution Probes Primer and Energy Systems in Canada. Ed.
So before I jump into it, I'm going to give an update on the most important announcement today. Richard sent me a note, and he wanted everybody to know that the baby boy came a little early. He is 5 pounds 7 ounces. His name is Wolf Seth Laszlo. He's doing great, as his mother, and now you have all the information, so there's no excuses not to buy a baby present. I'm looking at Sean Conway when I say that. So there you go. Jim did a great job in terms of the operational discussions, and as did Brian on the electric side. So I'm going to talk a little bit, tie it back into a couple of weeks ago, and talk about the operational, back into some of the energy planning issues that we have. And you're going to hear me say the same thing a few times, which is we need to change the conversation. And so I'm going to use that phrase a few times. I have a number of slides. I'm going to whip through the slides themselves. I got some speaking notes. I think you'll all end up getting the presentation available, and I know we want to keep this short so we can get to questions. So the first thing I want to start with is, and I'd actually asked if we could show the biogas video again this morning, because I think it ties into some of the things that I really want to speak to, which is around the fact that biogas, renewable natural gas, it is not unfamiliar to us. And in fact, there was a report done not that long ago by Alberta Innovates, which said that theoretically we could get 6% of Ontario's gas supply from landfill and digester gas, and we could get twice that amount from gasification methanization. So we're talking about theoretically 18% of Ontario's gas supply. Again, we're not unfamiliar with the technology, and so again, these are just a couple of quick photos of digesters and landfill collection systems. Actually, you saw this photo from a different angle when Brian showed it. This is the cleanup technology to take biogas and turn it into biomethane, so that we can inject it into the system. As you heard Brian mention, we actually do have that up and running now in the city of Hamilton. This is just a our station design or station metering orderization facility. It's all technology we understand, right? So we can go forward doing that. It's not like we're behind, right? We're there. So the question is, if you have all of that, how do you step forward? And we did that with, oh, sorry, let me get ahead of myself. The last point I wanted to make, as I'm talking about digesters, is that last, the 12%, which is the majority that you saw on gasification, as you saw in the video, had said probably sometime after 2020. And our studies say that that's probably where we're at with gasification. Methanization is probably, we're about 10 years away from really being there. But that's what really opens up biomass. Biomass is been gasified for a long time. It creates what's known as syngas, and you can burn that in engines and boilers. So the next step is a methanization process, so that again we can create renewable natural gas. Some people call it synthetic natural gas, and put it into the pipelines. So if you understand all of that, then how do you go forward? So Enbridge and Union a couple of years ago got together, and we put together an application to the Ontario Energy Board, and we had a very straightforward goal. We thought that what we needed to do, and that we were in the position to do in Ontario, is to create the foundation for a renewable natural gas industry, and that's what we went forward and did. Unfortunately, that was not successful. So that's part of the conversations that I think that we need to start having and understanding. What the board said, a number of different points they made on our application. I'll pick out two that I think are the most significant. The first, what they said is that we had the wrong goal. That in fact it was not for the gas utilities to create the foundation of the industry. Fair point, but then it leads to the question of then whose responsibility is it? And in fact, I see Stephanie Thorson in the back with the Biogas Association. I remember her coming to me at one point when that was raised in the hearing and said, well, then who's supposed to do this, right? So we thought that the two utilities, we supply all the gas, whether we sell the gas or not. We deliver all the gas in the province of Ontario, and we thought that we were in a good position. So the second point that they made is that to the extent that it is appropriate for ratepayers to pay a premium for biomethane, we needed to do some different things to really quantify the associated benefits and to optimize that, which is interesting because the problem is from a strictly energy point of view that gets narrowed into carbon. Not that carbon isn't an issue, but one of the interesting things around biogas is that you're dealing with a lot of different waste issues. In fact, OMAFRA, which is the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs in Ontario, have been in this for the last 10 years. And it wasn't because they were trying to eat the Ministry of Energy's lunch. They really didn't care about the energy. But after Walkerton, what they saw was that digesters is a great way to manage that waste. So there's all of these benefits. So we withdrew our application. That was what we were given the opportunity to do. So they didn't say yes, they didn't say no, but they said we need to really narrow it down. We weren't sure about that. So we did withdraw without prejudice our application. I'm not sure whether we'll go back, but certainly we are tackling the whole issue of benefits. The Canadian Biogas Association is going forward with a project that we are supporting. And I will also mention out, those of you who have an interest and want to learn more about biogas, there's a very easy way to do it. There is a conference at the beginning of March. I brought a whole lot of brochures at the front table in London, Ontario. So it's just down the road. And it does a few things. It talks about the rural communities as well as the urban communities, how you bring those together, and around biogas. So I invite all of you to pick one of those up on the way out and take a look at that. We're also working with the Canadian Gas Association and stakeholders across Canada to create a renewable natural gas technology roadmap. We're planning to have that done by the end of March. I'm going up to Ottawa in a couple of days. I'm not sure that we're going to meet that deadline, but at any rate, take a look for that. We'll certainly get some of you in the room that information, and you'll be able to take a look at that roadmap going forward. So let me step back and take a wider view now. I talked about renewable natural gas and being able to integrate that. I'm not sure if how many of you have seen this report that Mowat Center did, U of T in Mowat, sorry, the Mowat Center in September. But we would certainly at Union Gas agree with the statement here that what we need to do is really adopt a whole of energy system approach, and we need to think about changing the conversation. As you see, one of the recommendations is that the Ministry of Energy should adopt a whole of energy system approach in order to move away from its disproportionate focus on electricity and make R&D a foundational pillar in provincial energy policy. And we certainly agree with that. And from Union Gas's point of view, we look and we continually talk about the smart grid, which means electric focus. And we would like to expand that and talk about the smart energy network, right? So it's not that we devalue at all the role that we do currently play in terms of gas plants or in terms of certainly district energy, and district energy is certainly a large component of integrated community energy solutions, and we play a role in that. But we think that smart energy networks are much more or much wider than that, and we need to explore that. There are a number of different applications. You've heard me talk about renewable natural gas. Certainly gas to power. You saw that again in the video. That's being explored, and Jim probably knows a whole lot more about that than I do, because Enbridge has been leading on that with Hydrogenics out of Mississauga, and you probably have heard some talks in that in other seminars. Large combined heat and power, micro CHP, fuel cells, gas cooling as demand response. And of course, I think Jim also talked on this a little bit on CNG and liquefied natural gas for transportation. So again, looking at the entire integration and not simply bits and pieces. This is just simply a shameless plug by Union Gas for the work that we do with Ryerson. It is, actually this was in the Ryerson video, some of the things that are going up at the TRC in Courtright. One of my colleagues, I'm not directly involved in this, but one of my colleagues is working with Dr. Alan Fung and his students on looking at taking the waste heat from the WhisperGen micro unit that's up there and connecting into absorption cooling so that you can utilize that year-round. So what we've done is we've engaged the Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Energy, WISE, out of the University of Waterloo. This is a conceptual diagram you can go into. I encourage you, if you go into the WISE website, the first paper they did to us to start to lay out what Smart Energy Network might look like is on there. And what we're trying to do going forward this year is really to start to talk about, drill down a little bit. And where we're going to start with, I think the first paper, there should be 2 white papers this year, and we're hoping to have a conference, symposium, if you want, probably at Mars in the early part of fall to really delve into this. The first thing we need to get our hands around is a value proposition. I mean, it is, again, I go back to Jim's presentation talking about the social dynamics of this and the economic dynamics of this. So what's the value proposition? Why should customers care about this, and what does it do for them going forward? So quite honestly, we have a lot more questions than we do answers. But again, use the term and continue to use it. We need to change the conversation. We need to have it bigger. We need to have it more inclusive going forward. The last thing I'm going to say is step back, though, from all of this and say we just keep forgetting this. And we say we don't, but I think sometimes we get caught up in all of the neat new technologies. And energy efficiency, we still have a long ways to go. So this diagram is just simply from our last audited results in the energy efficiency programs that we run, and of course the electric utilities through the OPA. Enbridge has them. The one point I'll just make is if you take here, so this cumulative natural gas savings means that big number there says that if you take all of the energy saving equipment and processes that we altered in our programs in 2011, and you take those out over the lifetime of the equipment, that's the savings. And if you analyze that to just 1 year, That would be like taking 800,000 automobiles off the road. I put this up not just to remind us that energy efficiency is the first fuel. It is also something around community energy planning, because how do we optimize, right? So we have the OPA, we have the electric LDCs, we have the gas utilities, we have the municipalities themselves. And 2 weeks ago, those of you who were here certainly heard Rob Kerr, and I've been working on the Mayor's Task Force really since its inception, working with Rob since he's arrived there, and just trying to get some simple dynamic programs together, all coming together is not always easy. We do some things. Enbridge and Union have been delivering an OPA program called High Performance for New Construction. We're involved in some other programs around with Hydro One and some others, but there's a lot more work we can do. So again, the message is I take from community energy planning and some of the operational. There's operational in terms of the switches, the wires, the pipes, but there are also the operational around. We have a lot of different entities going forward, and I think the first thing is to have a broader conversation at the with everyone, and then move forward. So thank you for your time, and don't forget Richard's birthday present.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Our last speaker is Bruce Ander, who is the president and CEO of Markham District Energy, which is an energy utility owned by the city of Markham, and he's been in his position with Markham District Energy since 2002. He's spent his career in Ontario's energy sector with specific expertise in developing distributed generation and district energy projects, and he's also the current Canadian board representative on the International District Energy Association. Bruce.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I have the two advantages. I don't have any slides, and I'm going last, so I got to actually prepare my remarks sitting there, which is a great benefit. Let me just say a couple things about Markham and Markham District Energy, just to put my remarks into context. Of course, you know Markham, just north of Toronto, 310 citizens, the future home of the Markham Coyotes, which you might be reading about. But most importantly, in the energy piece, Markham owns a share of PowerStream, the second largest LDC in the province. So they're involved in the conservation programs that PowerStream would be involved with, and they're also very involved in solar. Of course, my business, they started 13 years ago, Markham District Energy, and we are in the business of thermal grids. In fact, electricity is really a byproduct. It's a secondary interest of mine. And we have been building a district system, a thermal heating and cooling grid in Markham's downtown now for 12 years. We serve 6 million square feet from our system, and eventually Markham Centre will be 30 million square feet of mixed-use development. Last year we started our second system out near the Markham-Stouffville Hospital, which is another urban node of development, which will eventually be 10 million. We've just been announced as the energy partner of a third development node around the Buttonville Airport, which again is about 10 million square feet. And the last area of development in Markham, as it prioritizes urban density as its way of dealing with our population growth, which is certain given the provincial policies of smart growth, is around Yonge Street and Langstaff, Yonge Street and the 407. Which is a development that we share with Richmond Hill. So eventually, and so Markham has made a decision to, in all of these areas of urban density, to develop thermal grids. And that will add up to something in the neighborhood of 60 or 70 million square feet in Markham. So as I thought about this panel this morning and operational challenges, I'm not really worried about operationally, how are we developing this? We're developing it very well, thank you, and operationally we're doing well. I think the operational challenge really goes back to the fundamental policy point, which is, I'm going to build on what Ed just said, which is energy does not equal electricity. This is a really fundamental problem we have in Ontario. And I'm sorry if there's somebody from the Ministry of Energy here or government, provincial government. So the number one operational challenge that we have, and when I say operational, moving from the Danish film, which is where we're heading, hopefully, where all countries are heading, to actually having community energy systems, integrated systems working in our communities, is to get that point and understand the role and significance of thermal grids, thermal energy, and the strategies that come from that, which includes combined heat and power. Now, again, interestingly, I just got this yesterday off of our District Energy website, International District Energy Association, and this was a guide just issued in London, England, by the mayor. So as you know, although energy policy may reside at the provincial level here, community energy is driven at the community level. So this was a paper called District Heating Manual for London, issued by the Mayor of London. And I'm just going to read you the first paragraph and a half in the introduction, written by the Mayor. Heat is the single biggest reason we use energy in our society. We use more energy for heating than for transport or the generation of electricity. The vast majority of our heat is produced by burning fossil fuels. 80% is from gas alone. And as a result, heat is responsible for around 1/3 of the UK's greenhouse gas emissions. This is unsustainable. If the UK is to play a part in the global effort, for the global effort to combat climate change, we need our buildings to be virtually zero carbon by 2050. The transformation of heat generation and heat use will create new markets and new opportunities, and it goes on. So here I would and I could read you the whole thing because it's really quite good. The Mayor of London gets it, that heat is really a dominant piece of infrastructure that we need to get our head around. If you look at what we need to invest in the energy sector, we need to understand it, we need to prioritize it, and then we have to find a way of funding it. And I always think of clean water in our cities, in our world. We understand it, that it's necessary, we prioritize it as non-negotiable, and we just find a way of funding it. Whatever happens with if we had something happen on our water system here in Toronto causing disease or health effects, there wouldn't be a funding decision at Queen's Park. We would just simply find the money and we'd spend it. And so I think back a couple of years ago to the Clean Energy Act. It was really a fascinating process for us in the biz here in Ontario. We had a minister that went to Europe, George Smitherman, came back, and he understood the importance of it. He prioritized it, convinced government of the day to prioritize it, and found a way to fund it. And what came out of that was the FIT regime, the feed-in tariff, and the thousands of megawatts of solar and wind that have resulted in the last few years. In the last month, the Ontario Power Authority, by a continuing directive from the minister, just closed a launch window for more renewable energy projects. They had 3,000 applications that came in at closing, totaling 825 megawatts, predominantly rooftop solar. And hopefully in the spring, for those that are in the solar business, there'll be about 200 megawatts of projects awarded for these new solar projects. Important. In the same, over the same time frame of the Green Energy Act over the last 5 or 6 years, industry has been talking about the importance of combined heat and power. So when you have combined heat and power, we're obviously producing power primarily with natural gas, but we're recovering heat for thermal grids. That could be a thermal grid like I have in Markham, serving an entire downtown core. It could be at a campus like U of T or York, or a smaller urban area, just maybe with a few dozen buildings or a few buildings even. So in the same time frame as the Ontario government has been smitten by the FIT regime under the Green Energy Act for solar and wind, the Combined Heat and Power Program had a few names over the last 7 years, called CSOP and CHIPSOP. The last round was a call to the industry to come forward with projects in the spring of 2011 for 200 megawatts of awards. Now, 2 years later, there's been 2 projects awarded, totaling 7 megawatts. I'm glad to report that my company got the 2 contracts. So if there's somebody from the OPA in the room, thank you very much. But on the other hand, we have got this completely backwards. And I can tell you, not that I'm anti-solar, and for those in the room, I've been called anti-solar before. Here's the deal. We've got on our property a 5 megawatt combined heat and power system that's been operating for some years now. We're in the process of building the next 7 megawatts that came from these 2 awards. But on the same property, we have a rooftop solar of 250 kilowatts. When I take a look at those 2 projects and look at the environmental benefit of those 2 projects, which is the small combined heat and power, recovering all the heat to displace all the heat, all the gas that would have been burned in all the buildings we served, compared to the solar project on a per dollar basis, the combined heat and power running on natural gas with heat recovery dwarfs the solar benefit by a factor of 4 or 5 to 1. The only reason we invest in solar is the environmental benefit. And it's a good thing to do. It's a matter of balance in our system, and it's a matter of balancing how the electricity system works with the thermal system and the gas grid. The 3 grids have to work together, which is really the Danish video that you saw. And so it's what I said to our council in Markham. If you had the last $1 million to spend on energy, on an energy project that you will own, will you invest your last $1 million in a solar rooftop, or will you invest your last $1 million in a combined heat and power recovering heat? And because when you look at solar, the only benefit you're getting is the environmental benefit, the reduction of greenhouse gases. That's why we do it. It's not reliable, it's hard to dispatch. It really has no operational benefit, where the combined heat and power, of course, has a dispatch benefit, but the greenhouse gas emissions, which is a surprise, it was a surprise to me when I first started studying it, it's a surprise to others when I say it. When I look at the heat recovery from our combined heat and power project, again, when we deliver that heat in the communities, it's displacing all the natural gas that would have been burned in the buildings. The environmental benefit on a greenhouse gas emissions basis is 4 to 5 times the benefit of the solar investment. So it's an interesting situation of getting our priorities right. So just to end off, operationally, when we take a look at our system, what we've done is we built a thermal grid connecting 6 million square feet. Again, eventually it'll be 30 million square feet. There's 2 things in that. That gives you the scale to run combined heat and power. And we've got our contracts from the Ontario Power Authority, and as I say, we're grateful for that. But the second benefit of that fleet of power generation connected to the thermal grid in Markham is when there is an ice storm or a major outage or some municipal emergency, though that fleet is small compared to the Markham load of 400 or 500 megawatts, but the fleet of 10 to 15 megawatts of power can operate in isolation and keep millions of square feet fully powered and heated if our citizens ever need it. The next piece of understanding what thermal grids will do is we now switch fuels from natural gas to another fuel, which again links with some of the other presentations. I was telling somebody earlier, the city of St. Paul, which is the largest hot water district energy system in the United States, or in North America rather, they created their system in the early 80s, so they're about 30 years old. In 2007, where they were heating the entire downtown core with coal and natural gas, they switched the entire project, or the entire downtown, to biomass using local clean wood waste. That is only possible because they'd connected the 30 million square feet to a thermal grid. Had that not existed, of course, each building would have had their own natural gas boiler and chillers and been little energy silos. The fuel flexibility of switching a community is not there. Enwave is the other example of taking an entire downtown core from one fuel, electricity as a fuel, if you like to call it that, or a medium, to the deep lake water cooling. So it's the benefit of these thermal grids. And our Ontario, the new minister will meet soon, presumably. Somebody a light has to come on that energy is not electricity. Energy, it's energy, and it has to be integrated. So, Mr. Chair, that's all I had to say.
It's a nice link back to the policy part of the conversation. So as we move into our question and answer session, I'd like to invite our speakers to come up to the front and have a seat as a panel. And we need one more here. And Tanya, do you have the microphone somewhere? We have the microphone. So if people want to ask questions, we'll have someone bring the microphone to you, both to make sure that people can hear, and I wonder if we can get the projector turned off as well, so it's not in our speakers' eyes. So we'll ask people, just wait until the microphone comes, because that way people can hear you when we're also recording the session as well. So that way we get a record of who you are and what you said. We're good. Great. Okay, good. Questions? Yep. Oh, where's the mic? Yep. The mic is approaching. Oh, sorry, we had one down here. We'll go there first, and then we'll come here. Okay. Good. So you can say who you are and your affiliation. That'd be great.
Christian Jug. I work at Brookfield Homes. This question is for Mr. Smith. Given the growth plan as it stands, Hamilton is to receive the least of all proportionate growth in the greater Golden Horseshoe. How does this fact impact the planning process you're going through to reach the best solution for your customers?
That's an excellent question. In terms of urban expansion of our particular jurisdiction, it does put a lot of emphasis on rate setting for us as we look at our capital expenditure plans. Certainly we have some of the lowest distribution rates in the province, and in terms of the asset management plan for existing assets to ensure our reliability, we rely on good planning in terms of our thank you. We rely on good planning in terms of our asset management to create the capital budget to invest in those facilities. In terms of expansion, one of the things that we need to do is, and we do align with our municipal zoning bylaws, and we do align with our municipal planning infrastructure to make sure that we're actually building the facilities that we need for the future. And it's a complex, it's a very complex situation because the needs of the electricity needs of customers are changing. Heard a lot of the presentations today that talk about a lot of behind the meter generation that's occurring, the FIT and the microfit. So the demands of the distribution system have to be flexible in order to accommodate those influxes of energy. And I think on a provincial scale, one of the things too that I'd want to illustrate is, in terms of the overall demand for power, what you see on the ISO website is really the meter points at all the transformer stations. You're not capturing a lot of the behind the meter generation that is actually occurring in the province. So in terms of our net demand for electricity, some of that information is really not truly the net demand for what we receive in terms of our power in the province right now. And I think until you actually combine all the behind the meter generation into that overall number, you'll truly actually see the real picture. So working closely with your customers is a really important aspect to plan for the future.
Can I ask internally, how is the conversation between the planning part, the land use planning part, and your utility planning part, how's that worked in Hamilton? Because there's obviously a crossover there you're talking about. I'm curious how that's actually been playing out. Because when we talked to the planners, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, they were quite literally saying it was specifically in relation to the growth plan. The answer about the energy part was, that's just not a lens we ever thought about this through. So I'm curious how that part's unfolded in Hamilton.
Yeah, so in terms of planning, certainly a lot of the expansion plans, whether it be development plans with developers for new subdivisions or commercial areas, part of the rationale behind expanding facilities is actually running a model based on the amount of load that's actually going to come onto the distribution system, and looking at sort of a capital cost allowance approach to expanding facilities to meet those needs for the future developments. So certainly we work closely with the municipalities in terms of their growth plans to ensure that we have the assets in place at the appropriate time to make the connections we need to.
So you're sort of taking the land use planning part almost as sort of as a given, and then you're responding to that, or are you looking to more influence where the urban form part of that conversation goes to?
Well, I think basically with, when you're talking about expansion of assets, we have to rely on the information that's provided and from the planners and also from the customers in terms of their developments and what their expectations are around electricity demands. So.
Next question. Sorry. Yeah. I had down here, we seem to only have one mic, so I'll just have to ask people to stand up and ask their question. Yeah.
Okay, I'm David Katz, and I'm formerly with Hydro. I'm on the Building to Grid NIST committee with regard to the smart grid interoperability, and they are finally recognizing that the smart grid is beyond electricity in the U.S. and North America. I'll ask maybe the gas people. We've seen the CHP, we see the seesaw. How about the buildings and the facilitation of these lousy boilers that are in those buildings now that are consuming natural gas at 42% or 35%, and facilitating that integration, but within the building, in addition to the central plant that we're tearing up Highway 7 for. And the behind the meter issue was that the OPA said, well, we're going to dispatch it, and you're going to have to pay all the debt retirement charges and the global adjustment. So how do we fit that in from the customer side of the building?
Well, what I will agree with you on is that's the sort of solution that we need to go to. I mean, there's no question that we have a number of thermal grids in Ontario, and we're going to see the expansion of that, right? I mean, in London, Ontario, which is actually my hometown, it's 100 years old. The thermal grid, but at the same time, there are going to be an awful lot of buildings beyond the reach of the thermal grid, or beyond the reach of a thermal grid anytime soon. And there's certainly within Ontario context, we talk about the issues of urban sprawl, but the fact is we have to deal with the urban sprawl that's happened since post-war. It's not going to go away. So most of our buildings that we're going to deal with over the next 20 years already exist, right? So that's what we need to deal with. I'm going to come back to, I'm not going to give you a very satisfactory answer in that I don't have a silver bullet. What I have is we need to change the conversation. We need to recognize that as a conversation that says, when you utilize it, because I certainly agree with all the things Bruce said about waste heat, right? I mean, I don't care how efficient or inefficient the system is that you're using. If you think about where we've gone on forced air systems were 50% efficient in this country because of a lot of the work, and we'll take some credit that, a lot of DSM programs through the 90s and the utilities worked with Enercan. You are no longer able to buy a gas furnace that is not a condensing gas furnace. That's policy within this country, and that's simply heat recovery, right? What's a condensing gas furnace? It is simply taking a furnace that used to put 40% or 50% of the heat up the chimney and running it through 2 more heat exchangers, right? It's fairly straightforward. So it's not, in that way, it's no different, right? So that's a policy that we finally got to after a number of years that started with customer incentives. Customers in the 1980s did not have to put one in, right? That's where we go back to the energy efficiency in the DSM slides, right? And then as you get to a certain point, you get to a certain critical mass, you can then put the policy in place. So it is not what we've had. Again, I don't want to repeat what Bruce said, but simply agree with him. The CHIPSOP and the CSOP and the SUNA CSOP and all of these programs that haven't gone forward. We need to back off and have a broader conversation about that.
Well, I think Ed, you just covered it. The only thing I would add is if I look at the basic infrastructures that we have built, whether it's electric, gas, these major systems, water, all of these, they've been built on rate base, and that rate base has come from policy. So I think, as Ed said, without that fundamental starting point, any significant change in how we tackle any of these infrastructure issues is not going to change.
I can only say in the U.S., it's all about peak. They pay 4 times more. The Auto Demand Response Smart Grid Association, of which Imbala and Rodin are members of as well. It's a different game. We've got to look at that and get the OEB to see that integration.
Good. I thought Jose, I think was next. Yeah.
Okay, just a reminder, you need to stand up to ask the question because we don't have a microphone here in the back. But my question has to do with, we apparently have a new Minister of Energy. I think that person now is known. I'll give you a score to figure out who that person is. I think it's a hero. And the point of the story to me, my question is, we haven't spoken about some big elephants on the decision-making part of the energy sector here in this province. Nuclear decision being one of the big elephants. You may want to, each of you, give some reflection to this comment and provide some advice if you were to be in front, and you will be in front of the Ministry of Energy very soon. What would be the take-home message? What could this new minister achieve in a short amount of time to change the paradigm in this province?
That's a very open-ended question.
Well, I wouldn't suggest that I'm anti-nuclear or pro-nuclear. I'm not going to wade into that. As I said, electricity is kind of my secondary issue. All I would say to the new Minister of Energy, and I think since I've been in the business in Ontario, this will be number 15 or 16, I can't keep track, what I don't like in terms of sustainability, economic sustainability is eggs in the, all the eggs in the basket. So I want to see, first of all, energy became, and the energy discussion being an energy discussion, not an electricity discussion. But the only thing I would say about the nuclear is to maybe pull back from the 50% level to some other level. The problem I had with the supply mix directive a couple of years ago, which came from the minister at the time, it had four basic elements, which was the nuclear percentage. It had the renewable energy percentage going forward, and so that would call for another 6,000 or 7,000 megawatts of wind and solar in particular, and biogas and other things. It had the conservation target. When it came to natural gas, it was really fascinating. All it said about natural gas, it had no target in terms of power generation. This was a electricity supply mix directive, and no target on how much natural gas power should be. It said we will use natural gas strategically as required. More or less, those were the words in the supply mix directive. That was crazy, in the sense that it would lead you to believe that natural gas power, because it's a continuation of fossil fuels, it's a necessary evil, only to balance off what we need. Striving for a completely renewable electricity supply. So the part I have about that whole discussion, and includes the nuclear, is it's the unsustainability part of not having more flexibility or more diversity, I guess, balanced diversity in our supply mix.
I'll just a couple of comments. Certainly I'm a big advocate for energy efficiency and how that fits into the overall integrated power system plan. I think the first thing is, an update to the plan is required. Certainly I think what we've fed into the plan in the past, it almost needs to be addressed on an annual basis. Our needs sort of going forward into the future for energy. On the CDM front, we've been looking at blocks of targets, and the sustainability of CDM as it goes forward has undergone so many starts and stops, both in our industry and probably in the gas industry as well, in terms of commitment. There needs to be more sustained commitment and focus on CDM and energy efficiency as the first, I guess, source of potential generation. I don't know why it was a fuel. I think it was a fuel, the first fuel or something. Yeah, so I think that term, we can kind of look at going forward as being our first point of resource. And also, in terms of addressing the peak, Ontario is a peaking province with regard to a summer peaking province with regard to electricity. And certainly I think we need to start looking at solutions also at the customer level to address that particular problem, and making sure that there's the right structure in place to make sure that projects go forward in the province. And it seems like there's been a lot of influence in terms of the current state of surplus of generation, and not really looking at the long term. And some of these projects are not getting to the table and not actually going through as quickly as we need to ensure that there's a stable industrial base in the province and ensure jobs going forward. So it's important to strike that balance, I think, between what we're trying to do with energy and also meeting the customer needs.
So the only couple of things I wanted to add was I think when the original, I think it was 2010 long-term energy plan had that original mix built into it. And one significant change that's occurred since then is the supply and price of natural gas. And so I think that's one of the complexities that has to come to that decision is, well, how do you now manage from a pure price perspective that mix? The dilemma I see, though, is that going to help us on a sustainability front? So if you're going to go on price to natural gas for base load, which the nuclears are currently supplying, well, that's not a sustainable long-term solution. However, if we look at the supply mix of natural gas that's now available literally on our doorstep in Ontario, it's hard to ignore in that decision.
There's nothing I'm going to be able to add.
Well, lots of possibilities there for a new minister to think about. I mean, I think that there's sort of I found myself on a panel last week asking, do we need a plan at all? Or can we sort of continue on the current sort of path of political management? And my answer was yes, but one that is vastly more flexible and vastly more adaptive than anything we've had before, because the variables, the key assumptions keep changing. And the sort of highly prescriptive kind of model of supply mix directives just don't work in that context. And they particularly don't work around, I would come out on a limb here and say, one particular technology whose time frames and capital intensivity precisely make it extraordinarily inflexible. And perhaps it's time for a little bit of a pullback there. Anyway, next question. Peter Love, yeah.
Peter Love, York University, and also nice to be back at Ryerson. I was here for a bit as well. And just on the supply mix, I mean, it's actually worse. The actual initial directive came out in 2006. It was based on information from probably 2003, 2004, and the 2010 energy plan was based on that directive. So we're talking about stuff that is now 10 years old. So I mean, the time frame here is just atrocious. But I want to come back to a bigger issue, and I think it's the crux of the matter. And we're talking about integrating gas and electricity. And Bruce, Andrew, and I were involved with an organization in Enbridge and Union and what used to be called Ontario Hydro. We're very strong advocates in the late 90s for energy conservation programs being funded by ratepayer programs, not government programs, not out of government programs, out of ratepayers. And the reason for that being is that in a recession like we're in right now, where governments are in deficits, I can't imagine the government agreeing to spend a cent on conservation when they're running huge deficits. So I think that part of it has worked. The conservation programs, the FIT programs are being funded by ratepayers. The problem with it is that you then have silos, and you have the electricity silo, and you have the natural gas silo, and OEB has got, and we can blame them, but that's what their job is, to make sure there's no cross-subsidization, there's none of this moving back and forth. And I think that's the real crux of it. So I think in Denmark, my guess is it's more government funding that allows some of this integration. And I'm reluctant to go there because it is very unreliable. But so we end up. The other thing I'll just throw in here, I've had conversations and gone around circles trying to get a similar toward a ratepayer funded program from the oil industry. And the National Energy Board have agreed it's an interesting idea and asked me to convince the oil companies that they should contribute to a conservation fund for oil. That hasn't gone very far, but because I think it's the one fuel that is getting off the hook. Electricity and gas both have ratepayer funded programs. But I think it's these silos, and to blame the OEB, I think it has to go a little higher than that. It's got to have some other force that integrates this and allows Enbridge and Horizon to do some projects that go beyond those silos. But I think that's our huge issue, and I'm reluctant to see something that would not see the funding based on ratepayer, because then I think we're into real political wins. At least with ratepayer, stable funding, but you end up with these silos. And I know that's what you guys are trying to break.
So I respond to that, again, sounding like a broken record. We need to change the conversation. And what I'll agree with you on, Peter, is that blaming the OEB is really easy, and you know, as a utility, you blame the OEB when they rule against you, and you put them on a pedestal and say finally they got it right when they agree with you, right? So you got to break that game. In British Columbia, as we heard 2 weeks ago, there's a bit of a different attitude, and it doesn't need to come from directives, but it needs to come again from that different conversation and set the goals, right? So our colleagues at Fortis Gas in British Columbia are involved and growingly involved in a number of lines of business that Enbridge has tried to break into. We haven't. We wouldn't let Enbridge take the lead and have just been rebuffed. And we saw what happened with the renewable natural gas. I mean, I thought we put together a comprehensive, I thought it's exactly what socially responsible gas, because we weren't going to make a cent. We weren't asking to put any of that cleanup technology into our capital. There was no money coming back to us. It was simply going into the gas stream that we're not allowed to make money on. We simply deliver it, right? So what it comes down to is not about directives. The OEB needs to be part of this change of conversation. They need to have goals. Let me tell you, you talked about the silos on energy efficiency. Let me give you, sort of a very small example of this. But if you think about the way the gas utilities over the last 10, 15 years have approached energy efficiency, or we call it DSM, we're not told what programs. We are given some negotiation, we go to the board, but we're given a goal, we're given an objective of how much gas should we save on an annual basis. We are now, this wasn't the case before, but we're now provided an incentive. And if, we hit that, and if we go beyond, right? And we have to have approvals for the actual programs. Nobody designs the programs for us. We design the programs. We are market-focused companies. We are investor-based utilities. This is what we do every day. So that's the dynamic, right? So it's about setting goals. I mean, I think that was, part of the conversation, if you're going to take it back to a higher level about the supply mix. Set the goals. What's the goal? Where does Ontario want to be in 20 years, 30 years? What are the incentives to get there? And that, I think, answers your point, Mark. Not on day-by-day minutia of trying to manage that, because you can't. So that's the kind of thing, when I talk about changing the conversation, that's on the broad part. And the OEB needs to be part of it, but they're not going to change, right? They're not going to change the conversation.
Actually, the only thing I'll add is, Peter, I think you had a great observation about transportation sector. And as I drove in this morning, I'm thinking, holy cow! You look at the energy involved in transportation in the province, and yet there is no program. Right? So as Ed says, if you look at the efficiency programs on the electric side, the efficiency programs on the gas side, what's the big hole in the middle? Well, it's transportation. So I think that was a good observation.
Would Enbridge support a ratepayer-funded conservation program for oil?
Well, what that's called is a carbon tax, and you've recycled the revenue into public transit.
I mean, Peter, we of course agree. We go back 15 years agreeing on the point of how to fund it. But some people have asked Markham, how have you funded what we've done in the absence of that or other methods? We've invested $150 million in Markham, and we're on our way to another $200 million in the next 10 years, if I look at our capital plan. So it's interesting when I talked about understanding it, prioritizing it, and finding a way to fund it. So Markham did the first two, and then they figured, okay, how are we going to do this? Because this is a very capital-intensive, upfront type of business we're in. So Markham decided a number of years ago to use 50% of its gas tax, which is hopefully it did pass the last budget, so it is enshrined for a while anyway. We're using half of our gas tax to fund thermal energy grids in Markham. And that's enough of an ongoing injection, plus our profits, to keep our capital build going. When I've talked to some other mayors in Ontario who are starting to understand the importance of maybe a thermal grid strategy, if they have an urban area that's intensifying, where we can, we're talking about 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions when we do our modeling in Markham, they say it's really, this is really important. Like, I can see this being our #1 priority. Then I bring up the gas tax as a way of funding it in the absence of other things. And I've heard from some mayors, well, we could never do that because we have this and this and this and this ahead of it. And so, you know, that's fine. The conversation has to be, it's either your number one priority or it's a high priority, or it isn't. If it isn't, it isn't. And often where the money, you know, when the money drops on the table, that's where your real discussion ends and starts and ends of whether it's a priority or not. So I'm fortunate for me, Markham made it a priority both financially and just, you know, at council. So.
If I could just maybe add one more thing. I don't want to overlook, like there is some pretty good initiatives in terms of joint ventures with the LDCs and the gas companies with regard to the delivery of the high performance new construction program. It's an extension of what the OPA is doing. So I think there's some good collaboration sort of on a micro level, you know, with regard to customer projects and how, you know, some cogeneration customer installations actually fit in with the CDM portfolio. Under the industrial program, we've kind of hit a little bit of a barrier with regard to those types of projects qualifying for any sort of incentives. And part of that is, you know, I think is aligned to our situation in terms of, you know, the surplus generation issue. And also I think part of it is in terms of the, you know, looking at sort of the trying to make the electricity fleet more green. So I think there's more opportunities, certainly at the micro level, that would be a benefit to some of the customers in terms of process and system upgrades that would assist their operation and really put energy efficiency and you know, right down to the most, you know, effective source, which is right at the customer level, you know, not at the macro level, but right at the micro level, right behind the customer's meter in terms of opportunities. So, you know, there's been lots of discussion and collaboration around those types of projects. It's just actually getting the framework to move them forward, which has been a barrier.
I think also go back to Peter's original question. I also think there's an element of historical accident. The local utilities in Denmark are both gas and electricity, and that makes this conversation a lot easier. By historical accident, we ended up with a division between the two. But clearly we're starting to have those conversations, but the policy institutional framework has not caught up with that. Next question. Yeah.
I'm Stephanie Thorson with Banking Strategies, and I just wanted to pick up on Ed's comment. I think a lot of this comes down to culture, and we just don't necessarily have a culture where we're vocal about what we're demanding. We certainly saw in the last election a change in people's willingness to support renewable energy. My question is actually for Bruce. Wonder what your customers would tolerate or accept, I guess, as a premium for purchasing renewable natural gas as a proportion of their fuel in your system. Do you have a sense of, you know, if they were to accept 10% of the gas as renewable natural gas, which is what the case is in parts of BC, and BC is very cultured, what do you think the uptake would be?
Yeah, we have a, I don't have a hard answer on that, but we have a sense for that because we've been considering, when we knew the utilities were looking at introducing a green natural gas into the pipeline. Of course, it would be the same as wind power coming into the electrical grid. It's the actual electrons or BTUs wouldn't necessarily flow into our boilers, but we could buy it and dedicate to it, be the bullfrog power of gas. And we've also been looking at, of course, we're moving ahead with a biomass study. I think you know that. And we're also looking at a biogas stream from an anaerobic digestion plant. So in the next 5 years, we will have another, so we've talked to some customers. The mush sector, our own shareholder, of course, is a friendly discussion. They have their own buildings that are connected to our system. There's a YMCA, there's 2 high schools, a theater. Those sorts of customers are more receptive to having the discussion than your commercial building or condo board. But we don't know that yet. But we have a sense that there could be, if we said, you know, right now their heat is based on what they would have otherwise paid for natural gas. We're following that pricing. So and they're pretty happy about that right now compared to 5 years ago. But we have had the discussion, if we had 10% of our heat generated through some renewable fuel, other fuel, would you pay a premium? And the answer is coming back yes. But you know, the polling on that has been in the past, the polling, the answer comes yes very high on the polling. When it actually comes to buying, writing the check and checking off the box, it's lower, obviously. But we have a sense there would be an appetite for that, yes.
One of the things I just want to pick up on that, because of the very specific question. So just on a general basis, when Enbridge and Union put forward the application, we actually went to customers. We did a customer survey, and customers said that they were the way we landed on the number that we said, which was going to be 2% of the gas that we sell or deliver to our customers. That would equate, given the prices that we were looking to pay, would be $1.50. So if we maxed out, if we achieved everything that we wanted to achieve, it would be $1.50 a month or $18 a year. But beyond that, and this is more for everybody in the room to think about, and some input on how we might go forward is, given that we've stalled out, we're not out of the renewable natural gas business. We just can't do it the way we did. So I'm talking to developers all of the time. So what we now need to do, at least in the short term, is find a way to take that developer and tie them directly to customers who are willing to pay those dollars. So one of the things, given everybody here is involved in the energy business in some way, shape, or form, in terms of, and I will talk about commercial and industrial customers right now, particularly those who are looking for that green, the green branding, because there is no carbon pricing scheme in Ontario right now. There's no carbon trading, so it is really on that basis. But I would ask you to think about that, because I think that may be in the short term where we need to go, because I think any projects of any significance that happen in Ontario, if they happen, will probably be landfill and will probably be destined to be exported south of the border, where there are renewable energy credits through the RPS systems that happen there, and they're willing to pay a premium. So we're not there now. So again, if we can find customers, whether they're district energy customers or banks that want to have a green image, or industries.
Good. One last question, and then we'll ask Phil and Sean to wrap up for us.
Here, my observation is, any change, like in the energy savings that we know from the energy generation, bottom to top approach is more required rather than the top to bottom approach, making some policy comes and then that's based on like the number happens. Example, in this room, we are burning these lamps 50% energy inefficient compared to the LED technology. Who has to take the decision? I'm just trying in terms of the last 6 months, walk data tanks, condominiums. People say, okay, what you are saying is right. But the thing is, we are not the decision maker, first point. Second thing is, if energy bill is less, many people lose their jobs, particularly the distribution. My energy, if I can give energy for free, the way the solar gives the life energy free, if that is free, where are the jobs? There are no jobs for the, particularly for certain people who depend on distributing the energy. So, say for example, what is the root of the energy? The root of the energy is the repulsion force. Triphosphate converting into diphosphate, and the diphosphate again becomes triphosphate to the food, and that is the life energy you and me are living. So, but that repulsion, suppose today I'm here and I say next time I don't want to see these lights here. It's just like, you are leaving the tap open, water is flowing. I say that someone in the headquarters or someone will come and control the tap. No, immediately you go and do it. But here we cannot see the current burning, so we just keep going. Because this is my practical experience, it happened in my condominium when I asked my property manager. He said, I told him the calculation for 100 tube lights he can save $432 per month. And all listening, he said that, okay, that's all fine, but we cannot do that, better we just keep quiet. He told me, I advise you, better don't come into this. Reason why? He said Philips gave him very big, intensive. Philips. Mercury lamps, today they are in the market. EASA, the Act, Energy Act, passed in 2008, Bush administration, they said Mercury and CFL lamps are safe.
We should focus to a question.
No, but the point is, point is, we discuss, but the bottom to top approach is not there. That is the fundamental repulsive force. That is the root of the energy. that doesn't come from the people, these things will not happen. Because the people have to, ultimately the people have to say that we don't want this. That's what the democracy is. And then the policy comes. We cannot wait for the policy. The policy comes from elected people, and the people who elect. And the people need to be educated. Not all democracies are real democracies when people are not intellectual. It's a hypocrisy, not democracy.
Your responses?
I'm not sure if there's a question, but I will tell you one thing about my business. Again, I'm not electricity is my secondary issue. We built 2 district energy systems in Markham to change what I think is the energy delivery mechanism in Markham without any energy policy in Ontario to support it. None. So it can be done. It's easier if the policymakers align with their rules and and the way it's funded and the thought process and encouragement and all. It's easier, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. And things do happen in the province from the ground up, municipal up. So I don't know whether that helps or not, but that's the only thing I'll say.
If I could just address the point, I think you have a real valid point, and it talks to the culture of conservation in Ontario, and there's an advocate here that's been an advocate for conservation in our province for a long period of time. We're not all at that same level of understanding of how important energy is to us in society. And, you know, when you get to the point and you're talking about trying to you know, deliver programs, you know, to customers and educate customers on energy efficiency, we still have a culture that, you know, when they're buying a home, the first thing that they're looking at is, you know, what's in the kitchen. You know, so you know, it's a lot of education that needs to be done at all levels in society we take for granted the resources that we have in this country, and I think your point is it needs to change from a cultural level, and that's an ongoing task that I think we're all committed to in this room. So, thanks for your comments.
Thanks, Brian. I think on a similar vein, you know, I think that the encouraging side is that I've talked to a number of developers who, without policy directive, without motivation from an external force, are themselves looking for more energy efficient solutions. They're looking for mechanisms for that to happen. Again, they still have to balance their shareholders. They have to show a reasonable return. But they are taking it on themselves to find solutions despite the policy. And I think to Brian's point, I'll use my brother as a bad example. He did one of these backyard pools and hot tubs and outdoor patio heaters and I said, what the hell are you doing? You know, this is not a good long-term plan. So that's the battle that we do face, though, is that despite the number of people and organizations out there that are fighting for conservation and sustainable solutions, there's also a force out there that tends to ignore that. So education, I think, and communication is important from all of us.
I don't think there's anything much to add.
Good. Well, I'd like to thank all of our speakers as well. Very, very interesting. Very informative. I also want to thank Karen Prochera and Tanya Roberts from CUI and SEI, respectively, who actually put all this together and got us all here in the room and made this actually happen. And I'd like to call on Phil Walsh, and then I understand Sean Conway as well, to give us some closing remarks. Okay.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out this morning, and for those of you who also attended our session 2 weeks ago. I'll leave it to Sean to do the final closing remarks and formal thanks. My name is Phil Walsh. I'm with the Center of Urban Energy here at Ryerson. My day job, though, is as an associate professor at the Ted Rogers School of Management, as well as with our Environmental Applied Science and Management program here at Ryerson. And my area is the policy side. And I think today we had some wonderful discussion and some wonderful ideas that have been put forward by the implementers. Because 2 weeks ago we had that same video. And I think, as Jim said, you know, it's great to see the graphics. And the policymakers that we met from the government, the same thing. It's fun to strategize. Always is. It's fun to get in a room and think about where can we go and what can we do. Let's set up a vision. Let's set up a mission statement. However, implementation is another story altogether. And what we've seen today is we've seen some discussion about the importance of integration. But with integration, we get complexity. And this complexity, as we've seen today, deals with things like different owners, some who are shareholder owned, some who are municipally owned. They all have different business interests. They all deal with customers. All these customers, as we've talked about, and the cultures, they all have different interests in terms of what they want. I'm going to ask this question. I'm hoping I see a lot of hands. But those people in the room here today, how many of you live in a house or an apartment where you have a thermostat that you have set to be lower during the day, during high peak usage, as opposed to the evening? That's wonderful. And I think that shows that we're going in the right step. I think you have to recognize with efficiency, and we talked about it today, that for some of the companies here, in particular the shareholder-owned ones, that efficiency is intuitively illogical. They're in the business to have revenue growth. And it becomes difficult when you have high fixed costs and you're cutting back in terms of the number of units that you're putting through the system. How do you allocate those costs? And what ends up happening, of course, is it ends up impacting the customers who, once again, are the least knowledgeable in terms of what this all means. And I think that we are fortunate in Ontario to have what I call essentially a quasi-regulated industry that will allow us to work towards integration. But I'll finish by saying this. The only way we're going to get there, given all this complexity, is to have the leadership there. And I think it's been pointed out by some of the members today where they think that leadership is going to be. And with the recent political changes, I think we know where that is. So I'll end again by saying that it's complex, but then so's a Rubik's Cube. I mean, the only way you break it down is by doing it. So we need to get out there and do it. Let's get the integration going. And I would like to, for those of you who would be interested in seeing how some other people think we can get there, is that the Centre of Urban Energy is having a documentary showing of the documentary Switch on the 19th of February. I think it's here at the Ryerson Library. So I would suggest that you go on the CUE's website, and you know, I think we can do it through Eventbrite. I know I'm not going to be there, unfortunately. It's Slack week. No, it's Reading week. But Karen can give people additional information on that. And Sean, you can come in here and finish it off.
Thank you very much, Phil and panel, ladies and gentlemen. I was only here because Phil was supposed to be in a class. I don't know what happened to that class. It must have gotten... but I'm delighted. This is the second of the two panels. I was here a couple of weeks ago for the presentation that I thought was equally excellent. I haven't heard Bruce Ander in a while, but I was reminded this morning of why I liked him when I used to hear him 7 or 8 or 9 years ago. First of all, he has a face that looks very credible and a voice that's very clear and a message that is generally unvarnished. So, Bruce, you haven't lost anything. The only question is... Well, I will tell her all of that. And the only question I would say, if you're going to get a hockey team out there called the Coyotes, I hope after Saturday night they're a team that doesn't bite. But a very good panel, and I just want to thank the panel again on behalf of Ryerson CUE. I want to thank Mark and Jose and all the good people from York. These are very useful dialogues, but I do think we do need to move forward. A couple of things that I heard today that I think are really very timely. And Jim, thank you very much for reminding us of your brother. It sounds like your siblings are like most of the siblings of people in this room. And when I come to these sessions, I look at a room like this and I always feel like the teacher who's at parent-teacher night. When Phil asked for the show of hands, I didn't turn around, but I'm sure it's very high. But that's the problem. The converted are all in this room. Jim's brother, my brothers are out there. If you drove into or took a public transit this morning, you were probably reminded that not everybody is on a kind of a rational wavelength. I mean, this city we now find ourselves, it's unbelievable what's happening. I've come to the conclusion, having been here sort of mostly for the last 40 years, that I guess we've decided, without announcing it, that we'll wait for the stroke or the heart attack. And then we'll do something. Because it's quite breathtaking how an advanced society like ours is letting what's happening in this city occur. I think, I don't know who said it, maybe Mark actually. Mark made the point that there are certain lenses that we simply don't apply to this question, and it couldn't be clearer. Every morning, if you, last time our friend from Guelph was, Rob was, I think he told me 3.5 hours getting in here from Guelph. I'll say in his absence, I was struck. You tried to come into Toronto from Guelph on a Monday morning in the wintertime when the weather was by car? Boy, that must have been an important meeting you were coming to, because, so somebody else here said, what's the value proposition? What is the value proposition for people not in this room? I think it's there. I think I heard it very nicely articulated by all of the panel. I heard from Brian specific things that have been done in the peninsula over the last 20 years that have provided a real benefit that may not be as well understood, I suspect, as it probably should be. I heard from Bruce, and I heard from Ed and from Jim very specific things. But quite frankly, for people not in the College of Cardinals, why would I do this? What's the positive benefit? Particularly a financial benefit? Is there one? Because if there isn't one, I'm not sure that I'm actually going to go through all the hassle. In what, as Bruce reminded us, in what order of priority? This is a complicated business, this energy sector. There are lots of moving parts. And with the best of intentions, you can push A and B only to find out that you didn't understand that C and D were standing behind the curtain and bit in a way that frustrated what you wanted to do. I thought the Enbridge Union case to the OEB about renewable natural gas is a really good example. I spent some time recently with some very senior people at the OEB, good, smart people who want progress. Their number one concern at the moment is how do we make a change in the regulatory environment that stimulates innovation? Well, I think I actually heard one potential place to start today. But as Bruce reminds us, what are the orders of priority in which, or on which you would want to operate? And about money, I mean, let me just make the point. It's not as though we're not spending money. I say without prejudice, we are apparently going to spend at least $250 million on the west side of the GTA relocating power plants that apparently we didn't need or nobody wanted. I'm not sure we're going to get $250 million, and I'm using very low numbers. I'm not sure for spending $250 million, we've got 25 cents worth of benefit. According to the sources I read, in the period from 2006 to 2015, the global adjustment will grow from about $700 million to $8.1 billion. $700 million to $8.1 billion. There's a lot of money in that hamper. And some of it absolutely critical, maybe all of it critical, but that global adjustment, which is that happy and felicitous phrase for what I call the laundry hamper. It's amazing what's being tossed into that laundry hamper. So when you talk about money we're spending or not spending, just take a look at some of the current accounts that are rising rapidly, not by tens or 20s of millions, but by billions of dollars. Are we getting an appropriate benefit from that? So I just want to say in summary, I think there's been some very good evidence brought forward in these two sessions. One thing I learned from spending 30 years in the town square is my friend Peter Russell up at the University of Toronto is right when he says that Canadians, and I think even more so Ontarians, and here I don't want you to take this the wrong way, Mark and Jose, but I'll tell you one thing I did learn. By and large, the Ontarians I used to meet, in good times and bad, did not want to be lectured to about why they should be Danes. They were interested to know what the Danes were doing, absolutely. But they were much more interested to hear from Brian about what had happened at Port Dalhousie about moving the yardsticks, or what might have happened in Markham about doing something. We are a practical people. We tend to be focused on, sadly, a North American environment. I know we should be better. We should be like the Europeans and the Asians, but among other things, a culture of plenty has made us very badly behaved on the energy front. And the culture of plenty has not gone away. In fact, I'm beginning to think my generation, the boomers, are the worst yet to be seen, because sacrifice and perhaps not getting the point that has been made here today, actually you have to look at the waterfront. You've got to look at all the pieces, as Bruce says. I'm not primarily about electricity. I'm about energy. I'm looking at the whole picture. That actually would mean something that we used to call the public good. I'm struck by, for example, how many of my friends love renewable energy as long as they don't have to look at any of it. And they are passionate, and they are educated, and they are virtuous. But you can have it. I'm for it. I just don't want to see any of it. And well, that's kind of interesting if that's your position. And I know it really isn't, but we're a practical people. We're about moving the yardsticks forward. There are always issues about, can we do it? What is the cost? Who's going to pay that cost? My generation's got pretty good at kicking the can down the road for, well, maybe there'll be somebody else. Those Generation Xers will be really happy to pay for the unfunded part of my pension plan or the unfunded part of my health care expectations. Teaching these people, by the way, gang, I'm getting the feeling that maybe it's not going to be a defense that's going to hold. But what we heard here today from very committed community people and industry people is there is good news. And we simply, I think, have to focus on what we have been doing that does move it forward. How can we do more of that? How can we draw the attention of the community, not just, you know, the committed, but municipal leadership, business, neighborhoods, on what's been done and why it's beneficial and why we should do more of it. I think one of the other things that a couple of people here reminded us of is the first rule of the Hippocratic Oath. Doctor, do no harm. It's one of the things I'm most concerned about is, can we stop doing things we know, however well intended, are actually blocking what we need to get done in general terms. So to York, certainly to Mark and to Jose and to all of you people, and especially today to our panel, thank you very much for showing us some very real operational opportunities and incentives that hopefully we can build on. So with this, we are adjourned. Thank you.